your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello and thanks for joining us. In spite of ICU numbers dropping over the past week, the Alberta government has asked Ottawa to bring in the military to help with staffing shortages in our medical community as the province has been dealing with the fourth wave of COVID-19. It's no secret that we have a shortage of both nurses and doctors. Now, to make matters worse, some in the healthcare industry are quitting since they refuse to receive the vaccine or are being forced out of their jobs for not getting the jab. Katie Woodruff is a registered nurse and a case manager with home care in Lethbridge. She too says she'll be losing her job at the end of the month for refusing to get vaccinated against COVID-19. Here she is in an interview with Hal Roberts.
Millions have already received the COVID-19 vaccine, and many believe getting the jab is the best way out of the pandemic. Why not just get the vaccine to protect yourself and your job?
That informed consent is really, really important. It's always been nailed into us in school and throughout my career that informed consent is essential prior to any medical procedure, and you can't have informed consent when there is any sort of coercion or anything like that. And the main thing is body autonomy, which is fundamental to medical ethics. And I think that that's a really important thing to stand up for, because if we don't have body autonomy, we don't have medical ethics.
Now, we already have a shortage of nurses here in our province. How much worse will things be with nurses losing their jobs, especially for those who work in the home care field like you do?
I think we're already spread really thin, and we have been for a very long time. The population is growing, and we're not getting any more nurses. We're not getting any more positions. We're having to deal with a lot higher numbers in our caseloads than case managers previously would have, like 10, 15 years ago. It's really, really tough as it is to keep up with that caseload and to stay on top of everything. So even just having one or two people gone will make a significant impact.
So Katie, will you look at a potential career change? What's next for you and your family?
Potentially, I think I will have to look at getting another career, which is really unfortunate because I love nursing. I worked my butt off to get here. I did school full time and worked 2 part-time jobs as a single mom to get through school. So it's been a really hard decision, and I really hope that that's not what happens.
Katie Woodruff is a registered nurse and a case manager with home care in Lethbridge. We appreciate her boldness to come forward and speak to us about this contentious issue. The option of having to vote for an Alberta Senate candidate will be on the ballot next Monday for the upcoming municipal election. Senate candidates are voted in, but it doesn't necessarily mean that these candidates will be chosen by Ottawa. The Trudeau Liberals have the final say in the matter right now. Pam Davidson is running for the Conservative Party of Canada for the Alberta Senate seat. She has a small business on her family farm and is an advocate for freedom of speech. She also strongly advocates for religious liberty, property rights, and responsible spending. She says if elected and appointed, she would push hard for a stronger voice for Alberta agriculture at the federal level.
There's been lots of different agriculture issues throughout the province. I know down south they would like to bring in a manufacturing for beets, and that's one thing that's important to them. In central Alberta here, or a little bit further north, they're wanting to bring in more manufacturing that we will keep in Alberta for producing our own food, such as strawberries. That's one big thing that I talked to some people about. I think our whole province really needs to concentrate on keeping manufacturing in Alberta and creating those jobs for Albertans.
A complaint has been officially filed by the City of Lethbridge along with other municipalities to the Alberta Ombudsman regarding the consolidation of EMS dispatch. Lethbridge, Calgary, Red Deer, and the Municipal District of Wood Buffalo says many regions across the province have been seeing issues since the consolidation, including varying degrees of service, which has impacted patients' care. The province consolidated ambulance dispatch on January 12th of this year. Government officials say the consolidation will save the province around $6 million per year. Coming up, a former Alberta surgeon talks about the healthcare crisis in the province. Keep it right here. Welcome back. The Alberta municipal election is coming up on October 18th, meaning Albertans will be heading to the polls to cast their vote for their respective municipalities' mayor, city council, and school board trustees. But as if these ballots weren't long enough, there will also be a couple of referendum questions attached. In a previously recorded interview, I chatted with Dave Naylor, editor of the Western Standard, about what Albertans can expect to see on this upcoming ballot. It's definitely the time of year for elections. So, I mean, you're talking federal election, Senate election. Now let's turn our attention to the upcoming municipal election on October 18th. So there will be some extra referendum questions on the ballots for Albertans. One of them is about keeping daylight savings time all year round. What's your opinion on this, Dave? How do you think Albertans will vote for that?
Whichever option gives them the most sleep. I would think. There's certainly a lot of locations around North America that have gotten away with daylight savings time. Mm-hmm. So I think it'll probably pass in Alberta too, and then it'll go through the legislation process to get rid of it, and you won't need to worry about springing ahead or falling back ever again.
So if it passes, how soon do you think that will come into effect? Usually we turn the clocks back the end of October, right around Halloween time. Would that affect this year, or would that be delayed because it has to go through legislation? Or do you think it'll be really fast?
Well, they would only have 2 weeks to get it through. So that may be too quick a time to do it. But I suppose, emergency bills have passed in less time. I guess it's just whether or not the provincial government wants to get off their butts and get it done. Remains to be seen.
Yeah. And what about the other referendum question? Should Alberta take part in the equalization payments? Should this be removed from the Constitution?
Well, that's going to be an interesting vote. The Tories, the UCP are now worried that Premier Kenney's personal unpopularity may cause people just to vote against it, just out of spite to Kenney. So what really should be a 99% slam dunk may actually turn out to be less than that because people want to make a political statement about Kenney. Certainly most Albertans feel that equalization should be changed. We seem to pay out billions and billions more than we ever get back in our time of need. And we've certainly in the last 4 or 5 years been in our time of need and really not seen any money coming back other than a paltry sum.
Mm-hmm. Dave Naylor, thanks so much for joining us today, and thank you for your insights. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, anytime.
Well, the City of Medicine Hat has seen its share of challenges related to the COVID-19 restrictions and the uncertainty in our times. Our next guest is no stranger to politics or to the task of being a mom and creating online content. She joined Hel Roberts from the Gas City earlier this week to discuss getting other moms involved in politics.
So how do you get more moms engaged so they get involved in politics at a grassroots level?
Great question. It's not very hard. I really can't leave my house, to be honest, and not run into somebody I know. So whether that's at the park, whether that's at a homeschool get together, or in my case, I kind of had a shoe in because before I left mainstream media broadcasting, I had been in over 30 schools over the course of 18 months. So when you get into that many classrooms, you tend to know everybody. Or if your kids play on sports teams, you can't go anywhere without, bumping into people you know. And one of the top things I heard from moms, they would approach me and say, I feel like you're a voice for me. I could never do what you do when it comes to, talking about those political issues. I'm not very smart when it comes to politics. And I would always stop and say, it has nothing to do with being smart. You're being made to feel like you don't know enough, and we need to grow your confidence. So let's talk about politics, right from the comfort of our homes. So I started hosting Zoom meetings. I started doing FaceTime meetings. I'd meet with different churches. I'd get involved wherever there were groups of people, and I would just plug them into the issues. So, I mean, it really truly is grassroots.
We'll have more with Val Olson and Hal Roberts coming up in the second half of our show. You won't want to miss this extended interview. After the break, a retired doctor speaks about his strategy for moving Alberta out of COVID restrictions. Stay with us.
Sweden hasn't ruined their economy. They've managed to get through all of this without masks, without lockdowns, without social distancing. And it tells you a lot.
We're getting reports that certain Alberta Health Services staff are refusing the mandated COVID vaccine. Some are quitting because of it, and others are facing getting their walking papers by the beginning of November. So how will the province handle a situation like this when there's already a shortage of doctors and nurses? Our own Hal Roberts weighed in on the issue with a retired doctor who's a pioneer of open heart surgery in Alberta. He also implemented Western Canada's first heart and lung transplant program. Take a look.
Dr. Madri, we're receiving reports here at the station that certain AHS staff are refusing the COVID-19 vaccine, and some are even quitting as a result. So how will the health authority handle a situation like this? I mean, we already have a shortage of doctors and nurses here in our province.
Many of those healthcare workers who I've worked with for 30 years, they were there on the front line, not being vaccinated. Many of them may have developed COVID and didn't even know it because a lot of them were young and healthy. So they were there on the front line. And now they're being told that unless they get a vaccine for which they have legitimate concerns about with respect to myocarditis, death, clot formation, central venous thrombosis, splanchnic venous thrombosis, etc., Bell's palsy, and all kinds of other potential problems. And now they're being told that they have to be vaccinated when they've worked for 18 months without being vaccinated. It really doesn't make any sense. And to think that the government would mandate that they have to be vaccinated or they're going to be fired, I think is an egregious step in the wrong direction. And I think it breaches every thought of normality and morality and individual rights. So I think it's a colossal error and it's a backward step. And it's only going to create further problems, further delays in people accessing the healthcare system.
So Dr. Madri, why do you think that some of the numbers Alberta Health is posting when it comes to COVID-19 deaths and maybe some of the numbers of the ICU beds, the shortages of beds, may differ from what we're actually hearing from certain frontline workers?
Sure, those are two important questions. The first question is that many of the deaths that have occurred, in fact, probably in order of 90 to 95% of the deaths that have occurred did not occur as a result of COVID-19. They occurred as a result of the underlying condition. And the reason we know that, for example, is that the PCR test that was used to make those diagnoses is notoriously wrong, particularly at cycle thresholds over 30. And they were running cycle thresholds 35 to 45. So the diagnosis of COVID-19, for one thing, was completely erroneous. So, and when you look at it from another perspective, the average age of death for individuals with COVID-19 is 82. The average age of death in the general population is 81. So you could interpret from that you have an advantage, a life expectancy advantage by having COVID-19. So it's ridiculous to think that COVID-19 has been the cause of death, but it has been the cause of the lockdowns, and the lockdowns itself has caused many more deaths. Now, the issue of ICU beds and hospital beds, the rubber meets the road in the ICU. When this all started 18 months ago or so, the ICU capacity in the province was 272 beds. And in roughly June of 2020, excuse me, the Premier came out and said that we can ramp up to 1,081 beds. Now, he didn't do that. And he should have been smarter. I mean, he has been told by myself and others that the solution to handling this problem without having lockdowns was to simply double the ICU capacity. And there was plenty of opportunity to do that, which solves two problems. And one of the problems is to handle any surge from purported COVID-19 patients. The second is to solve the chronic problem that exists within the general healthcare system, and that's access and long waiting lists. So you double the ICU capacity. He could have won on both fronts, but he didn't do it. And that's a failure of leadership, in my opinion. And mainly because, like I say, he's been told. So he knows that. And it's a failure of leadership by AHS as well.
Keep it right here. We'll have more after the break. Welcome back. With all the anxiety in the province about COVID-19 and so many questions about political leadership and strategies, is there an appetite in the UCP to replace Premier Jason Kenney? Well, Hal Roberts asked that exact question to legislative reporter Tyler Dawson with the National Post. Take a look.
Let me ask you something. When it comes to Premier Kenney, and if the UCP decided, you know what, maybe it is time for a new leader. First of all, I seriously doubt that Kenney's going to resign or step down. Who would be strong enough, though, to take on Trudeau and the federal Liberals? I mean, Kenney's really the strongest candidate that the UCP has. Like Travis Taves, maybe?
Well, forget Trudeau and the Liberals for a second. Whoever it is needs to defeat Rachel Notley coming into the next election. And of course, she's polling at 55% support right now, which is, pretty substantial for an opposition leader. But you're right. Who is it? A lot of the people who are in the government right now are going to have to wear the handling of the pandemic to some extent. It probably cannot be Tyler Shandro because he's also been very unpopular. Travis Taves is maybe an option. And I think observers are also casting their eyes north to Fort McMurray to keep a close eye on Brian Jean. And if he decides to come roaring back, whether or not he'll, re-enter the UCP fold or something is a completely open question, but I think that's probably one person that people are keeping an eye on right now. Maybe it's a good thing that the next provincial election is not till 2023, so to give the UCP and Jason Kenney a chance to maybe rebuild the party's image? Yes, certainly they are going to need that time. If Jason Kenney sticks around, they're going to have to try and deliver on some of the promises that they haven't managed to yet. And sort of rehabilitate him to some extent, I think, going into the next election. And then, of course, if they need to pick a new leader, they also now face this issue of they need to make sure this person is known to Albertans, that there's name recognition, and find a way to sort of, if they decide that Jason Kenney is too toxic and they have a new leader, then they need to somehow create this image around this new leader that is, sort of separate from the government's handling of the pandemic. So it's I think no matter how you look at it, a challenging brand exercise is ahead of the UCP in the next 2 years. Here might be something that'll help the UCP regain a more popular image. Those $100 gift cards, that'll begin dishing out for those who got the jab. And Tyler, apparently the payout's around $15 million. I guess this is one way of getting some taxpayers' money back. Oh, there you go. Yeah, think of it as a rebate program. I got mine too early, so I never got my gift card. But maybe some Ralph bucks will be coming in the mail. But yeah, $15 million is what the total cost is looking like for this. The program ended Thursday night, and so after that, it's cut off, and people will no longer be eligible. And they saw some uptake in vaccinations after the gift cards were announced. But if you look at the day by day, blow by blow of the number of vaccinations that were received, it was actually the vaccine passport system that came in that really, really ratcheted up the number of vaccinations that Albertans have received. Drew Barnes, the MLA right now for Medicine at Cyprus.
Now, he's proposing a new rural Conservative party. Tyler, will it be another Wild Rose party? And will Drew Barnes want to lead it?
Well, that sort of seems to be the idea, that it'll be another Wild Rose party, maybe not that Mr. Barnes wants to step up and take over leadership. The idea is basically that the values and the promises the UCP were built on have been sort of subsumed by the demands of urban Albertans, is basically the gist of his argument here. And so what he says is that there needs to be a rural party that runs in the 40 or so rural ridings, I think it's about 40, in the province to really push rural issues in the legislature. So it's an interesting proposal, I think, because if you look at the sort of seat breakdown and imagine this new party shows up and takes, I don't know, let's say 20 seats from rural Alberta from the UCP. Then the UCP has however many, and then the NDP. I mean, all of a sudden you have a pretty fractured three-party legislature, which hasn't been the case for quite some time since the full collapse of the Alberta Liberals. So it would create a very, very different dynamic were that to happen, and problems for the UCP for sure. I imagine the NDP would be rubbing their hands happily in their back planning rooms, but we'll have to see if it happens. But it's interesting that Drew Barnes made this proposal because it's something to watch, because there have been other parties that have popped up. Of course, we had the Maverick Party that ran in the federal election. We had the People's Party running in the federal election. So there's kind of a handful of new parties here and there that are worth keeping an eye on.
You're right. I could see the NDP just, licking their chops and kind of rubbing their hands in the back rooms, thinking, yeah, let's split the right vote so we can go right up the middle again. Kind of like that other election. Remember that last election when we got elected? Our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, thanks so much for your time today.
Always a pleasure, Hal.
Coming up after the break, we feature some of the top local stories from around southern Alberta. Stay with us.
Had 5 reps to go to matches. My wife and a co-worker were in the garage here still with me, and it was a challenge. I was battling physically and mentally at that point.
Welcome back. A Lethbridge police officer pulled off a pull-up fundraiser recently to raise money for first responders. As Micah Quinn explains, this challenge gave him just a few calluses.
These calluses are the aftermath of Terry Figut's pull-up fundraiser for the Legacy Place Society, which will provide support for Lethbridge first responders and their families. Figut started his challenge at 10 a.m. on October 9th and ended at 2 a.m. on October 10th. He raised $20,000 for the Legacy Place Society after an anonymous donor fronted additional funds on Tuesday.
When I got a call from Legacy Place Society telling me that we hit $20,000, I didn't know what to say. It's been an amazing experience, and to know that we've reached people and that there's people kind enough to donate that amount of money. It's just absolutely amazing that it's going to help someone.
Figut ended up finishing with 4,080 grueling pull-ups in total. He ended up surpassing the former Guinness World Record pull-up champion from 2013, David Goggins' record of 4,030.
At that point, I had 5 reps to go to matches, and my wife and a co-worker were in the garage here still with me, and it was a challenge. I was battling physically and mentally at that point. But I was able to get up there, and they gave me a huge applause because it was a huge feat, and it was a pretty cool feeling to be, in the same playing field as someone like that. So
Figut's fundraiser page will be open until October 17th if you want to add to his funds for the Legacy Place Society. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Thank you, Micah. Some of us may have turned up the furnace as overnight temperatures dipped below freezing. However, this isn't possible for everyone in our community. As Carson Marzouk reports, organizations in Lethbridge are quickly preparing to help out our most vulnerable population.
Organizations around the city, such as the Soup Kitchen and Streets Alive Mission, are quickly adapting to the mild increase in clientele as the temperatures start to drop. Executive Director of the Soup Kitchen, Bill Ginther, says this is the time of year when many are looking to access a hot meal or warm clothing.
People tend to move around a little bit less. If you imagine ourselves being homeless, you're on the move most of the time, seeking for your next hit or whatever it may be, right? And so we find that they tend to hang around more. We always serve hot meals, and we do that even now, and especially when you're cold, you've been outside, a hot meal is the best thing thing for you.
The brisk fall weather forces many to seek shelter, heat, and a warm meal, which Ginther says they have extended their hours to allow for more people to access.
Lunch is now being served. It'll be from 12 to 12:45, and people can stay in that long, right? I think we're going to extend that a little bit so that they can stay in a bit longer. If they've been out in the cold, they can warm up not only from the inside, but the outside as well.
Cameron Kissick with Streets Alive Mission says it's only the start of the colder weather, and Streets Alive is expecting an increase in the number of people using the resources over the next few months.
Because we are, especially right now where we're in that period where it's cold at night, warm during the day, oftentimes people will take off layers later on in the day when it's warmer and then lose them, so they need to replace that layer. So they'll be coming back more regularly to get layerable clothing.
With the quick change from 20-degree heat to below freezing temperatures, staff at Streets Alive are quickly looking for donations of warm clothing, including toots and gloves.
We are looking for layerable clothing that they can wear in layers, water-resistant type of clothing to keep them dry, good footwear.
To donate, visit either Streets Alive Mission or the Soup Kitchen for more information. For Bridge City News, I'm Carson Marsouk.
Thank you, Carson. The Lethbridge Farmers Market wrapped up last weekend, but don't worry if you weren't able to attend. A new year-round indoor YQL marketplace is set to open this weekend. This is the first year-round market to open in our city. Co-owner Helen Manzera says the idea came to them after hearing countless people talking about not having a year-round place to sell their items.
It was a matter of Calgary's got year-round markets. Edmonton's got year-round markets. They've got a big population base. They can handle it. Red Deer opened a year-round market. And we were thinking, you know, if Red Deer with their population size, which is similar to Lethbridge, can have a year-round market, why isn't there one in Lethbridge? So that's where the idea finally solidified in coming forward with this endeavor of year-round market. Anything that you find at a farmer's market, so that would be your fruit, your veg, your baking, your handicrafters, will be in this market. We are having a growing number of vendors coming to the market, so there will be a different vendor in every time you come through the door.
The market is located in the old Salvation Army thrift store on 3rd Avenue South. It's open from 11 a.m. till 7 p.m. on Friday, Saturday 10 a.m. till 6 p.m., and Sunday noon till 6. Proof of vaccination will not be required, but masking is mandatory. In the second half of our show, we hear more from Medicine Hat social media mom and political organizer Val Olson in an extended interview with Hal Roberts. But first, more from Dr. Dennis Modry.